Hey Sparklers, how we doing? So this is unusual for me before a podcast to come in and do this video, but I feel it's needed. What we're going to be discussing today, I do need to put a trigger warning on. So just to let you all know that there will be some hard conversations during this podcast. Thank you, Terri, so much for joining me. I did like to hear your story, and I think it's an important story for all to hear. But I hope you enjoy this podcast. And again, if you feel triggered at any point, do turn it off and I won't be offended.
Special guests, we share the flame. Through every word we claim our name.
Hey Sparklers, how are we doing? So if you don't know me, I am Empress Sparkle. I am a witch, clairvoyant, Hellenic pagan, and if you didn't know, a soul seer. So today I have with me Terri, who is a book writer and stuff. So could you introduce yourself for me, please?
Sure, Empress. My name is Terri Kozlowski. I am a certified life coach, author, Reiki coach, as well as somebody that can help people transform the trauma in their life into something that is authentic, healing, and allow them to be at peace.
Love that. Love that. Very similar to myself, guys, as you know. So can I ask Terri, what was the start of your journey, if you don't mind me asking?
My journey began as a very small child when I realized that my mother, the way she was not raising us, was a problem. So when I was about 3, I recognized that something was different with my mom than other people's mothers. What I learned later in life was that she was an alcoholic and she was more concerned about dealing with her pain or covering up her pain than she was in raising 2 little girls. So I became very responsible for my sister, who's 11 months younger than I am, and became her surrogate mother through us growing up. My parents divorced when I was 8, and my mother moved out of the house. My dad was the first man in the state of Maryland to get custody of 2 young girls, which was pretty amazing. What I didn't realize until much later in life was that my mother actually never showed up to court. So that was the first of a series of abandonments that she had done to my sister and I. So we're living with my dad. We are not seeing my mother. She had moved away. And one summer when I was 11, my mom called and said she was sober and she would like us to visit. So my dad agreed, and we went from Pennsylvania, which is where my dad lived, to New Mexico, which is where my mother lived. And when we got there, we had 2 weeks of fabulous time with my mother. Some of the best memories I have with my mom occurred in those 2-week time period. Then she started drinking. And from there, it just spiraled. And what we did not know at the time was that she also was a drug addict. So one night, she's doing her partying thing and somebody drugs my sister. She didn't wake up for 3 days. And when everybody's passed out, I go to bed and I wake up with a gag in my mouth and my hands and feet tied. And 3 men rape me while my mother and her best friend are standing in the corner watching. And this was so that my mother could get free drugs. My mother disappeared for 3 days. My sister wakes up terrified, and I'm, terrified that my sister's not waking up. So I have my little head on her chest and I hear her breathing. I feel her heart beat. All of that seems normal. She's just in a really deep sleep. When she wakes up, she's hungry. I'm making her food, and my mother reappears. And she walks in with her paycheck and hands the paycheck to me and tells me I need to go cash it and buy groceries. So my sister and I'm 11, and we're on the streets of Albuquerque, New Mexico. We're walking to the grocery store. I cash the check. I get a money order for the rent and buy groceries. And my sister and I walk back, pay the rent. My mother takes the groceries from our hands, puts our suitcases on the front stoop, and says, "It's time for you to go." Shuts the door and locks it. Number 2, abandonment. So we get home. I call my dad, and an angel appeared. And in this little story of mine, a gentleman by the name of Alan, who has fabulous cowboy hat, cowboy boots, big buckle. He's an itty bitty tiny guy because my mother's only like 4'11", and he wasn't much taller than my mom. And he took us out to a wonderful dinner because he and my mom is who picked us up when we arrived. And before he leaves, he hands me his business card. Now, why would a grown man hand an 11-year-old a business card? I take the business card and say thank you. And for some reason, I slip it down into my suitcase. I have no idea why. When I call my dad, the people that we're with, none of them drive. And my dad says, way to get to the airport. And I remembered Alan. So I called Alan and asked him if he told him my mom had kicked us out. I needed a ride to the airport with my sister. And he said he would pick us up. The flight was at noon. He picked us up at 8 in the morning, took us out for breakfast, walked us hand in hand onto the airplane, got us seated, and disappeared from my life. Never saw him again. Tried finding him much later, have no idea. I knew he was a nuclear physicist at Los Alamos in New Mexico, but that's all I knew. Did not know his last name. And so that is my little angel story. Never saw him again. And I got off the airplane when we got back to my dad, and my sister's running into his arms, so excited to see him. And I walk up very calmly and say, we need therapy. Now, this is in the 80s. Number one, I shouldn't know what therapy is, but I did know something happened. I did what happened because I didn't know about sex at the time. This again is in the 80s. Didn't know about sex at the time. But I knew something profound had occurred and that we were unable to deal with it at whatever age I was. Now, interestingly enough, through this journey, I actually never felt alone. I always knew that the universe was present with me, and I went on a search as to find out why. So I spent from the age of 11 until 18 in traditional therapy. Again, since this is in the 80s, they didn't quite know what to do with me. We never did talk about what actually happened, other than some of the abandonment issues. And when Oprah Winfrey came out on her show as being sexually molested, that was the first person that I had ever heard of that this had happened to as well. So I had a great affinity for finding out if this was happening to other people. And sadly, it had been. Not only happening to me, but thousands upon thousands of other people. And current statistics are 1 in 3 females are sexually assaulted by the time they're 18. So it's gotten worse, not better. And some people say that, and I think it may not be worse. It's just that we're able to talk about it now,
Yes.
unlike it was in the 80s when I was the only one until I heard of Oprah. So I went through my teenage years where God and I argued. I ended up telling my dad what happened. And this is where it's amazing how the answers that you seek come, but you are so wrapped up in your trauma, you're so wrapped up in your pain that you don't see that this was a revelation that you could have grabbed onto much earlier in life. My dad said to me after I told him everything, he said, now what? Now, at this point, I'm 12, and I think now what means, do I want to prosecute? Do I want to continue therapy? What is it that I'm to do now? And I realized when I hit 40, okay, so I'm 12, took me till 40 where I realized that was the profound question. Now what? Now, am I going to wallow in my pain like my mother did all of her life? Am I going to repeat story and re-traumatize myself by allowing my egoic mind to point out my hypervigilance for fear? Everything was terrifying to me. Talking to another person was terrifying me. Somebody tapping me on the shoulder terrified me. So what was it that I was supposed to do? And when I turned 40, I realized, oh, that's the answer. It's we spent so much time asking why me. And it doesn't
Yes.
matter the why me. Why me is because somewhere along the way, we agreed to have this experience because we needed to grow from this experience. And then our life purpose comes out from these traumas to, for me, help other people.
Yeah.
I have a story that as I grew and understood that I had agreed to this pain, I had agreed to learn from this pain, and I needed to reframe it in a way that not only did I realize that it wasn't my fault. I was never broken. I was never small. I was never unworthy of love, which is what we tell ourselves. This happened because I'm unworthy. Something bad happened to me. I'm a bad person. And it's none of that. It's the egoic mind becomes so hyper vigilant to try to protect us from ever being hurt again that it causes us to see not the reality of the situation, but the worst case scenario of the situation.
Yeah. See, now I completely agree because this is one thing that I talk about forgiveness a lot. And
Mhm.
people are shocked at me because I say you don't have to forgive them. So, like with your mum, I'd say to you, you don't have to forgive her, but now we need to forgive you. And people look at me like I'm insane. So I love that point that you've actually pointed out because we do then will sort of wallow in the self-pity of I deserved it, it was my fault. We've got to forgive ourselves for that part of it,
Mm-hmm.
not actually what happened, not the people that done it. So I love that point because people don't actually realize the day you actually forgive yourself, how freeing it is. How's
Correct. Because we punish ourselves for so long and under trying to understand the why me versus, okay, wait a second. Bad shit happened to me. Let me acknowledge that this bad thing happened to me. And then let me acknowledge the fact that I spent from the age of 12 until 40 wallowing
yeah,
and wearing my trauma as a badge, like I survived this. And the reality is, if we wrap up who we are in our trauma, then we never really learned and we were supposed to learn by overcoming our trauma. And when
that
we
is so
overcome
true.
our trauma, we become who we were authentically meant to be. I believe that when I came into this world as an infant, I knew what my purpose was. I knew who I was supposed to authentically be, and that along the way, I got lost. Trauma caused me to get lost and to hide who I authentically am. I put masks and armor on to protect myself, which is exactly what the egoic mind is meant to do. Your ego, when you have trauma, especially when you're a child, protects you. That's its number one job, to protect you.
Yes.
But
And
as we grow, we're supposed to learn that that protection is for a time because we're supposed to then see that this isn't about us. The trauma occurred to us, but it wasn't about us. It was about them. It was my mother's issues that caused her to sell my innocent for drugs. It was the three men's power issues that caused me to lose my innocence as well. It wasn't anything I did. I was whole before the trauma. I was whole after the trauma. But when we feel fragmented, it is because we have put them on that our ego says this will protect you. And we use all these defense mechanisms to hide who we authentically are. And therefore, we hide our light. Our light is hidden by the mask and armor. So all that comes through are these little rays of sunshine every so often until we learn to take off the mask and armor and be vulnerable and speak about the trauma. The number one thing that I hear from other people who've been victimized and traumatized is that when they first tell their story, the amount of light that comes back into their life, because now the secret, the shame we put upon ourselves, shame is always put on by other people. So the people that said to me, shh, don't tell anybody because this will happen and that will happen, or we're going to harm your sister. All those things that get told to us to keep the secret. It's not our secret, it's their secret of being mean, their secret of being nasty, their secret of hurting a child, their secret of pedophile, their secret of drug use, their secret of their own shame and hurt gets put upon us. And the moment we tell our story, that shame gets lifted from us. We
I
have
think,
guilt.
sorry, lovely. I was
Go,
just going to say,
go
I
ahead.
do think myself personally, there's sort of a thing with the story because I know a lot of people which are stuck in their story as
Mm-hmm.
well. So you need
Yes.
to be careful not to get stuck in your story. Because I know a lot of people where they just, and I was one of these. So I was one of these where I told my story over and over and over and over again, just because no one, not the fact they wouldn't believe me, but I felt not heard. So it's sort of like I actually got stuck in this story of speaking about it
Mm-hmm.
as much as I can. So I think it's also the fact of that sort of like our trauma also can become us in that way as well. That can actually become who we are. We sort of come our own trauma because
Correct.
all we are in life is what happened to us as a kid. Um,
Correct.
and that actually also takes away people's life when they get stuck in this trauma, this cycle of this is what happened to me. You know, you meet someone and you just tell them your story, and it's like, I look back now and I'm think, why did I even tell that person my story?
So
And so,
in my book, Raven Transcending Fear, I spend maybe 2 paragraphs telling anybody about the rape. Okay. 2 paragraphs. That's it. And a lot of people, I tell them, if you don't want to actually hear what happened in New Mexico when I was with my mother, if you don't want to read that portion because you know that trauma occurred, read chapter 1, skip chapter 2, but the rest of my book is about healing.
yeah,
So you asked me about my story. I told you my story, short and brief, to the point. I had trauma. And then I spent the rest of this time talking about the healing process. And that is where our power comes from. We reignite who we authentically are, our inner power and our divine authority of who we came into this world to be when we skip the retelling that causes additional harm and damage because we then reintegrate all of that.
yeah.
I tell the story from the other side. And what I mean by that is I can speak on a podcast, I can speak to a room of 1,000 women, and my story shocks them at the beginning, but I only spend 2 or 3 lines talking about the actual trauma. Everything else is about the healing process because that is where people they get stuck in the fact that they don't realize that now they're supposed to heal. And healing does not mean retelling your story on a continuous, regular basis and re identifying with the trauma. The story is about your resilience, your recovery, your ability to take off the mask and armor and become who you were authentically meant to be when you came onto the earth school.
Hell yeah. Excuse, I know that offends some of you guys because you're Christian, but heck yes. Because this is one of the things that for me, so I'll just explain a little bit, went through similar. From 2 till 5. My mum, I get on well with her now, but constant abandonment all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't have a dad. So I went through similar, and I literally 26, 27, well 25, the woman come into my life and taught me how to heal myself. And then 26, 27, I literally started to use it properly. And by the age of 32, I was finally healed. And when I say finally healed, I don't mean finally healed, guys, because we heal every day. We have to do it every day. That
Correct.
it's a harder process to be truly healed than what it is to be, I don't know what to call it. There's sort of a median. where you're ready to heal, but you don't know where to go, if that
The
makes
messy
sense.
middle. It's the
Yeah.
messy middle. It is where you have become aware of the trauma in a way that you need to heal from it. And you start going down a journey where you realize that there are certain triggers that you have in about life, and you've started healing from some of those triggers, and yet at the same time new triggers pop up. And this is where you don't, it's like, what am I doing here? The other thing and analogy that I have used is called the thorny blanket. And the thorny blanket is when you wrap yourself up and you're wrapped up in your pain. And my mother never let go of her thorny blanket. She died wrapped in her thorny blanket.
Mm.
And the idea is that when you're wrapped up in the blanket, you know what the pain feels like. And these are the people that get stuck in their trauma. They know what this pain feels like. And they're so used to it, that they're okay with it. But the healing process, you have to start taking off the thorny blanket. And when you do that, you don't realize that you have abscesses because this blanket had thorns in it into your skin. And you take off this blanket, and some of it is pussy, some of it's scarring, some of it is scabbing. You scratch open a scab because somebody accidentally, came up and was rubbing on your shoulder trying to calm you down, and scratched open another scab that you didn't
Yeah.
realize was in that healing. So all this new emotion, which isn't necessarily bad emotion. It's just unfelt emotion, because when you are wrapped in the thorny blanket, you're not feeling a whole lot of anything but the pain, and that you're used to it. So you have all these new healing emotions, and some of it is forgiveness for yourself. Some of it might need to be forgiveness for those that harmed you, depending on what journey you are on. But when we start dealing with those thorny blankets and removing that and really trying to do the healing process, it's messy. It's a messy thing.
It is messy because, so for me, I concentrate on the soul. So I see souls in three different shades. Well, I say that the grey shade is about 100 different shades, but main shades is black, grey, and white. And one of the things I knew when I met this lady and she took me on this healing process, she was like, right, one of the things we need to do is get you back up to white, because I was murky at the time. And for me, it was this understanding of how holding on to this skill for my siblings, holding on to this skill for myself as well, for the fact that, I saw it as I put myself in some of these positions. Holding on for resentment as well. So like I had a lot of resentment towards friends, towards people, thinking, well, how come you didn't have this? How come, and also I held resentment against people because this happened a lot. We can't deny it. This is in 80s, 90s for me as well. And this
Mhm.
happened a lot. But the trouble is, I held resentment for these people where they they could get on with life and just ignore the fact it had happened. And it was like, it weren't until I actually understood what I was seeing with souls that I understood they actually didn't. I
Correct.
understood that they were still very grey or black souled. And I was like, they've actually just learned how to hide it, how to hold it in. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of people don't see. And it's funny that you bring up alcoholism, because I find a lot of them are alcoholics,
Hmm.
because we don't actually realize there's three different forms of alcoholism. So you've actually got your binge drinkers, which go out every weekend and they get as sloshed as they can every weekend or every couple of days. Then you've got your what they call a working alcoholic, which is where
Correct.
they're constantly drinking all the time, but you'd never know until sort of late at night. And then you've got what um, people here in the UK, we would call them work drinkers. So it's every time after work, they'd sit and drink no matter what. And people don't realize that is actually three different forms of alcoholism.
Correct.
And a lot of people that I found and I find healing actually use that method a lot. And it's quite shocking because when they get to that middle sort of messy place that they realize how many of them go, oh, the other one's smoking weed. I'll just use that to cover it. And it's like, no, let's not cover it. Let's not cover it. I can show you a way without, I'm sure you can now, lovely, go through a way without re-traumatizing the person to
Hmm.
heal. I use a lot of Reiki now to heal,
Hmm.
a lot of energy cleansing now to heal. And it's like some of the girls which come to me, they're so shocked because they're like, I was expecting us having to re-traumatize ourselves, because you go through counseling and
Correct.
you re-traumatize yourself, keep having to go over it, and then other memories come up that you completely forgot about because we've
Hmm.
put that protection wall up. And now you're suddenly like, actually, I'm re-traumatizing myself. So can I ask you about helping other people heal, how you're sort of like, what sort of ways that you do that? Can I ask that, lovely?
Sure. So one of the things that I need to know when I'm meeting with a client, I do need to know what you believe your trauma wound is. And sometimes it's easy, and sometimes they're still not willing to tell me. And part of this comes down to they haven't told the truth to themselves. So I go through a process where I don't care if you're lying to me. I don't need you to be lying to yourself. And when you lie to yourself, all you're doing is extending how long it's going to take you to recover and to feel that you are whole, because you are whole. And I believe that everybody is whole, even if they've been traumatized and they feel broken, but they feel broken because they're continuing to lie to themselves. They're not allowing themselves to say, this bad stuff happened to me. Now I'm going to reframe this in a way so that I can use it to become stronger, and I can use it to make myself feel whole, and I can use it to maybe help other people in the process. And so some of the things that we talk about is ways to reframe the trauma. For me, most people think that being raped by 3 men when you're 11 is the trauma. For me, that was secondary. For me, the trauma was the relationship with my mother,
Yeah.
the abandonment that occurred in court, the abandonment occurred when she disappeared for 3 days, the abandonment when she put my suitcase on. And then, believe it or not, she actually abandoned my sister and I on her deathbed. When she was dying, she told the caregivers that she had no family. So even in her death, she was that. So for me, that's my biggest abandonment issue is what my core issue is. And what I realized when you look backwards, your vision's 2020. All the relationships in my life that were meaningful to me when I was younger, I ended up pushing everybody away. Because if I pushed them away, they could not abandon me.
This is one of the things that I actually say to people. The emotional abuse is actually worse than the physical abuse.
Correct.
It's like the physical abuse, the stepdad's giving me a whack, the sexual abuse, the rapes, I can put that all behind me. But it was the emotional baggage. So everyone, when I went to counseling and stuff, people would say to me, "Oh, this is because you had this done. This man did this to you," and I'll be like, "No, that doesn't sit right with me." And I think back in the day, trauma had to be some sort of physical abuse done to you. And they didn't really understand that it was actually more the emotional abuse that was the hardest thing.
And what's interesting is now there's all kinds of studies showing that the voices in our head after trauma is almost always the voice. For me, it was my mother's voice. Okay. It was my mother's tone. It was my mother's anger. That was what my egoic mind used and ruminated about when I got stuck in something. And it's because that was the voice that started that emotional abuse towards myself. And then I just continued it. And when I was 40, the other awakening I had when I was 40 was, oh my gosh, I did this to me. I'm the one that's been causing my own suffering and misery since I was 11. Yes, the trauma occurred, but I kept allowing it to continue within myself. And for me to release it, and this is where you talked about forgiving yourself, the first place you have to do forgiveness is with yourself. Now, I did move on and I did forgive my mother because I learned for me that I held on to relationships, and I get very attached to people. I don't get attached to things, but I get attached to people, especially those that showed me kindness or showed me love that was genuine. I get attached there because I didn't have it. Didn't feel I got that from my mother. So when I found people that would give it to me, I would really attach to them. That's how I ended up marrying my first husband. Was I fell in love with his mother as a mother. I wanted her as my mom. So I married a man I didn't love. I had a baby with this man. And when we got divorced, guess what? I got to keep his mom.
Oh, I love that. I love that because sometimes people don't stay in our lives, which is very hard.
Correct.
Very,
Well, they're
very
not
hard.
meant to. I believe that a lot of times people come into our lives for a reason and then they're supposed to leave. And I would not have been able to be where I am today had I stayed married to my first husband. It just would not have happened. I would have continued to stay shrunken because I needed a place where I felt safe enough. Because until I married my current husband, I didn't know what safety felt like. And I found it very strange. I had this strange feeling when I met my current husband, and we've been married for 28 years now. And that it wasn't love. I didn't know what it was. And finally, I realized I feel safe. Oh my gosh, I feel safe. And when you feel safe, you're allowed to, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, safety is number two. And if
Yeah.
you don't feel safe, you can't continue on that hierarchy of needs to self actualization. You'll never make it if you don't ever feel safe. So, with my current husband, I felt safe and I was able to start moving through the other processes of healing because you can't heal if you're not safe.
No,
You will always stay bound to that fear.
that is so true because it's a bit like my girls, bless their hearts. Everyone sits there and they're always shocked at mine and my girls' relationship. Like they come and tell me every minute detail of what's going on in their lives. And people sit there and they say to me, how come they do? And I was blessed. I healed by the time my girls were, my eldest was max 7, I'd finally healed. And by this, because I did, I actually gave them a safety place. So they didn't have to lie to me. So there weren't, and this isn't me criticizing people parenting. This is just the fact me pointing out you haven't found your safe place. Because my girls, because I hadn't found my safe place before that, they couldn't come to me and tell me stuff because I'll straight away go, oh, what's that going to look like to other people? What's that? What, we need to sort this out, and stuff like that. But once I found my safe place and I knew I was okay, I knew I was safe, I then gave my girls a safe place, so my girls would come to me and they'd say to me, Mum, look, this is what's happened. I'm really sorry this has happened. And I'll look at them and I'll go, is that all? And they'll look at me like I'm crazy, because I've great example. Jasmine broke something once when she was little, which is my middle daughter. She broke something once, and I think it was her phone. And like other parents, if their children's phones break, they're like, "That's so expensive. How are we meant to replace it?" Rah, rah, rah. And she come to me and she went, "Mum, I'm so sorry. I broke my phone." And I went, "Oh, is that all, baby girl? well, you'll have to deal with a cheap one just for now, one of the really old phones. Is that okay? And she just burst into tears and went, When's, I won't use the actual child's name, when so and so broke their phone, their mum smacked them and put them to bed for 2 weeks. Why aren't you doing that? And I went, It's a phone. It's a phone. And I
Hmm.
think that sort of put into her then that mummy is her safe place. She can come to me with anything. And I wouldn't say to her, well, that's wrong. Even now, she'll say to me, talk to me about like smoking. She'll say to me, my friends smoke. And I go, right, you want to smoke? Okay, let's have a conversation about it. And she'll look at me like, oh, my friends don't have to do this. I go, no. I says, Mama let you smoke. She is 18, guys. So she isn't young. I just realized that. Um, but that you need to understand the future consequences of smoking. And we'll have a proper conversation about it. And she's like, no, I'll stick to my vape. I'm like, oh, okay. But it's because she knew it was safe enough. She didn't have to do it behind my back or anything like that.
Hmm.
She knew I was safe enough to come to and say, look, my friends are doing this. They're telling me that I should do it. Should I do it, mum? And it's like, I think that is one of the key things of healing, actually, is safe place. Sorry, lovely, for interrupting. And I just feel like I needed to show that as a parent as well,
Hmm.
how actually creating a safe place is really important and why healing is so important, especially before having children. Because sometimes, especially
Yeah,
if you have daughters, and you've been abused in the ways that we have, that can actually re-trigger you. Because I
correct.
actually found that having daughters really re-triggered me, really, really bad. And I was so overprotective of them. Like they were not allowed out my sight. They weren't allowed
Hmm.
to do if they went to friends, I'd have to have their friend's number, I'd have to know exactly address, I'd have to have exact times that they were coming home, etc. So they weren't the fact that I was controlling to the point they weren't allowed friends, etc. But I have to know where they are and if they're safe, like constantly. And now my daughter's on holiday with her mate, and I haven't spoke to her for 2 days because I know if she needs a safe place, she'll ring me.
So when I found out I was pregnant and I only have one son, when I found out I was pregnant, and you said it was very triggering for me, oh no, I need to heal. I don't want to pass on this to my child because my mother was sexually abused. I was sexually abused. My mother had generational trauma. Now I have generational trauma. It stops with me, period. And so I spent my entire pregnancy going through Codependent No More, which was very popular back in the early 80s, early 90s. And I must have needed more time because I was pregnant for 10 months. So before my son was born, but I went through a majority of my healing for me so that I was not going to pass on the negative attributes that I had that I was aware of at the time to my child. So it can be triggering in both good and bad ways.
I love that because I think that's actually an important thing. Because before my third daughter, I was well, not fully healed. I was 2 years off being fully healed.
Hmm.
Um, but I was on my journey to being healed because I
Hmm.
think my journey was very different to everyone else's because mine was more of a spiritual journey, which takes a lot longer. I don't mean it really, but the spiritual journey does take a lot longer to heal you with. But it was more about, but I have to admit, when I now, like now, I will look at my eyes and I'm like, I'm glad I did it that way because they're so white. But if you looked at them when I was depressed and I was in this spiral, they're grey. And I'm like, it's so weird how our eyes can tell us. But it was triggering having my girls because I was so afraid of having them traumatized the way I was. I was so afraid of it. And it's like people laugh at me because if my phone rings and it's my kids, like now, I will answer my phone. And even though I'm healed, there's always that worry of, not that worry or fear, there's always that concern of, I don't want them to feel like I did when I tried to ring my mum. And I didn't have that
Again,
phone call answered.
right.
And even though I know that's abandonment issues and stuff like that, and I say that to people, and I'm like, but I'm over it. It's just now I'm at the point where, because I am healed and I can see where my mum went wrong, I'm now making sure I don't go wrong there with my children.
Again, this is where you have reframed a trigger that was negative for you into a positive way to live your life for your children. So you've reframed it in a positive way. And this is what actual healing looks like. It's when we take the
Oh, it's
are
froze.
meant for us.
Oh, no, you're back. It's all right.
Okay. Um, when we take those triggers and realize that we are reframing them so that they are part of our healing journey, and we know. So, for example, for me, the three men who raped me were Hispanic men. So I spent years when I saw a group of Hispanic men, I was horribly, horribly triggered, would get to the other side of the street, would, turn around and go the opposite direction, whatever, so that I'd stay away. And the universe is a funny way of making us deal with things. And I ended up working for a small company that was owned by Hispanics. So I was surrounded by all these Hispanic men, but I learned something in that environment. And that showed me that I was being triggered by a race that was a very loving race. And these men were safe to be around. And that now, when I see a group of Hispanic men walking towards me, my ego still turns on and say, "Hey, do you see what's coming towards you?" And then I have to be able to say to myself, "Yes, I do. Thank you for pointing that out, but I've been healed and this no longer affects me." And I can walk right by them with a smile.
I think that's one of the things. So, one of the things that I always say to people is judgment darkens the soul faster. It's
Mm-hmm.
the fastest thing to darken the soul. And I think that's one thing that trauma does leave us with is judgment. But once you've healed, you can sort that judgment out. It's a bit like, for me, babysitters, because that's who abused me, was our babysitter. So for me, it was like I spent years of, are my children going to be safe here, safe there? And that's not the reason I homeschool. I'm anti the government system. Okay, it's not the reason I homeschool because of babysitters and leaving them with people. um, it's for me, it's sort of like there's judgment for our safety is important. So if you see a crowd of 20 lads and they've all got their hoods up, looking dodgy, that's a bit different. Or you've got a knock on your door at 3 o'clock in the morning, that's a bit different. Judge because you need to think of the safety aspect. But when, like with yourself and myself, when you're looking down the street and you go, or my friend, I remember before I healed, one of my friends went, "Oh, so and so's babysitting my kids tonight." And I went, "Why? Why would he want to be around your kids?" And straight away, I'm judging this person I've not even met before. I don't even know from Adam. And all it is because she was desperate to get hold of a babysitter. And like yourself, with every time you see Hispanics, you would straight away go to, "Oh, they must be like them." That is where that can darken our soul, but it's because of our trauma. And this is another reason that actually healing is so important because
Mm-hmm.
we judge so many people just from our trauma, just from
Correct.
you know, um, another great example, because I know a lot of people watching this struggle with abandonment, is just their partners going for a night out. So
Yeah.
many people who, like the girls I know, because they've been abandoned so much, their partners can't even go for a night out or a drink, because it's like they automatically go through, he must want to leave me now, and stuff like that. It's, yeah. Sorry, I took
I can
over.
speak to that as well because I am a child of an alcoholic. My relationship with alcohol is really strange. And for most of my life, I've been around people who drink. And what I didn't realize was how much it affected me. So in college, you go to party. I didn't drink, but I learned to carry around a glass of Coke with a stirrer in it because if they thought I was drinking, they'd leave me alone. And then I was always the designated driver because I didn't drink. But I ended up being involved in a biker gang, and I was head of a biker gang for about 6 years. And when we had the big gold ring motorcycles, and when we would ride around, we would stop for the night, because if we were traveling someplace, we stopped for the night. We always ate at a restaurant very close to the hotel, so we would park the bikes and walk to the restaurant, and everybody would start drinking. And I would notice that all slowly but surely, my shoulders would rise to my ears. I got very tense, and I couldn't figure out what the problem was because none of these people were mean, nasty like my mother was when she got drunk. They were all very happy. They were unwinding and they were joking and having a good time. And they were doing it responsibly because we'd walk back to the hotel and everybody go to sleep. So they weren't doing anything wrong. And I realized it was my angst. My angst with the alcohol was the problem. It wasn't that anybody else was doing anything wrong. And that's where I had to learn that alcohol isn't the issue. People drinking alcohol isn't the issue. People getting drunk isn't the issue. And if I feel uncomfortable, I don't have to stay. I'm a grown adult. I can say, you know what, I've had enough, guys. Good night. And I can leave. And when we realize that we are re-traumatizing ourselves when we allow that angst with whatever it is, whether it's Hispanics, whether it's alcohol, whatever your angst is, it is your angst, not theirs. You can't control anybody else's behavior, but you can control how you respond or react to a situation. And when we react, it's because we're basing that out of fear. But when we respond, it's a loving act towards ourselves and those around us. And I learned to respond that if I really started feeling anxious about the amount of alcohol that was flowing, I could graciously say, I'm tired, guys. I'm going to head off to bed and walk away. They were fine and were allowed to continue. Nobody got upset. And I was remove myself from a situation that I felt uncomfortable in until I got to the place where I could stay because I realized nobody was doing anything wrong and nobody was harming me in the process. And then those triggers slowly fade away because, like I said, Hispanic was understanding why I was triggered. The alcohol wasn't necessarily something that most of us would consider as a trigger because everybody goes out and drinks, whether it's in college or with your adult friends. It's socially acceptable. And therefore, if you are uncomfortable with it because of whatever trauma you had, or you're coming from an alcoholic home and when mom starts drinking too much, she starts hitting too, and you don't want to be in the line of fire, you get out of the way. And then these things are where we need to learn to not just heal, but learn to have boundaries in place so we can respond from a loving place instead of reacting out of fear.
I think that's one of the important things. And I have to say, because of what you say, I'm a nightmare for telling people to cut people off. Like, people tell me off for it all the time. They're like, Empress, I nearly called myself by my real name then. Empress, you can't keep telling people to cut people off. And I sit there going, yes, I can. And they're like, no, you can't. Because during this healing journey, I think that's something also that's important that I heard you say. You didn't directly say it, but I sort of heard it, is the people you choose to be around. So at college, you've got all these people that are, drink, here, come on, next one, drink, 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 shoot it down. If you're hanging around with them people, that's when the trouble starts. Whereas if you're hanging around with the people like the biker gang, where you know you can go, do you know what, mate? I've had enough tonight. I'm headed off. Where you can do that, it's a complete different kettle of fish, because then
Correct.
you can literally feel safe. And again, it comes down to safety again. And I think that is one of the things that actually is a great point when us healers do keep saying, right, you need to cut this person off, you need to cut that person off. And people sit there, or you need to have them at arm's length. And people sit there and they're like, you're going to end up with no one. If you keep telling people to do this, they're going to end up with no friends. And I'm like, no, they'll find the right ones when it's time. I
You attract your tribe. You attract your tribe. When your energy shifts, the people that really are meant to be part of your life will start showing up because they'll be attracted to the new light. I am all for cutting people off, and I cut my mother off. So I've now married my current husband, and my mother is wanting to call and talk to me. And I have set a boundary with my mother, which is if she calls and she's sober, I will talk to her. If she calls and she's drunk, I will not talk to her. That was my boundary. So she called and she was drunk. And I said, Mom, you're drunk. I can't talk to you. And I hang up. And I remember I was against the wall and I crumbled to the ground again from the wall and burst into tears because in the back of my head, I hear, honor thy mother and thy father. And I spent a lot of time in the church. And one of the things that I finally was told was honoring your mother and your father does not give them permission to abuse you. And nobody has the right to abuse you, even if it's your mother and your father and you're trying to honor them. I was honoring my mother by not allowing her to abuse me again. I was honoring my mother by allowing me to stand up and say, I'm worth more than you trying to harm and belittle me because you don't love yourself. You don't get to harm me because you're not willing to take care of yourself. You're not willing to love yourself. You're not willing to heal yourself. And you want to blame it on me. Mm-mm. I'm going to stand up for myself now and not let that happen. So I quit talking to my mother. And I quit talking to my mother from the time I want to say I was right about 30 at the time. And it was in 2005 that my sister called me in tears that my mom was dying. Mom's dying. For some reason, she put me as her medical power of attorney. Again, I haven't spoken to her in 15 years, and I have medical power of attorney over my mother. And my sister says, doctors won't talk to me. Please don't let mommy die. So I called and talked to the doctors. And when my mother was conscious, she wanted to talk to me. And I said, no. And I made sure that my mother's health was fine. And right before she left the hospital, I decided, since I knew she was in the hospital for 2 months, guess what? I knew she was sober. She was not drinking. She wasn't doing drugs. So I agreed to talk to her. And, I talked to her briefly. And then a couple of weeks later, she was visiting my sister and she was still sober. So I talked to her again and told her that if she stayed sober, that my son and I would come visit. 2 days later, I got a phone call saying she was drinking again. So I never saw my mother. The last conversation I had with her was then when she was in Pennsylvania, and she died in 2012. So I'm all for cutting off people if they are going to continue to be abusive, continue to harm you. And that is, you have to stand up for yourself, because if you won't do it, nobody else is going to. You have to take responsibility for your mental wellness.
you have to be your own safe place. You have to be your first safe place. And when I talk to people and they say, oh, but you're selfish. Like if you talk to my family, they will say the last, like since I hit about 26, they say, oh, she's turned so selfish because I've cut most of them off. And I'm like, no, I'm my own self place, I'm my safe place. Like, I know for a fact I can go in my own head and I'll be able to say to me, oh, you are beautiful, you are kind, you did this right, you did that right. And I'd be able to say that to me. I won't now need to hear that from anyone else. Like, even though I do hear it from anyone else, and I'm still bad at taking a compliment purely because I'm like, do they really mean it? Because sadly, that's the way I've been brought up. I'm like, do they really mean it? Um, but I know for a fact I'm my own safe place. And I think that's actually really an important key. Once you forgive yourself, this is sort of like the order you have to do it into. Forgive yourself, recognize yourself, become your safe place. They are the three keys that I found myself personally, as well as when I teach in people. They are the three keys with your sort of safe place and your with healing is them three keys. And I love how you've sort of alliterated that as well, that you've found that they are your three keys is the forgiving yourself, becoming to know yourself. So guys, if you wonder, I don't call it getting to know yourself, I call it accepting the darkness within is what I call it. And then becoming your own safe place. And becoming your own safe place sounds really basic and easy, but it's actually the hardest in healing. It is like everyone's like, oh, forgiving yourself must be the hardest. I'm like, no, that's one of the easiest. That and accepting darkness within is the two easiest steps. Um, but actually coming your own safe place, knowing you can shut your door and you ain't gonna have while you're sitting watching your programs or when you lay in bed that you ain't gonna have the clocks turning about, oh, I did that wrong. Why did I do that? Why does everything wrong happen to me? Knowing that you can be your safe place and you're not going to torture yourself at night time is actually one of the hardest things I find.
Turning off the egoic mind that has been playing to keep you safe for so long is a very difficult reframing process. And it's a mindset shift that has to occur within you. And in order for you to be able to say to the egoic mind, thank you for that warning. I see it, I recognize it, but I'm healed from that and I'm moving on. And the egoic mind, when you start ruminating about things, it's a spiral downward into depression, because I look at depression as being fearful of the past, because that's what it is. You're wallowing in the past and then therefore causing your own depression. Anxiety is being afraid for your future. And for me, that's where I spent most of my time, was the ruminating about the future. And one of the things that I realized is when I started ruminating about, well, if I say this, then they'll say this, and then I will respond with this. When you start playing that game, the minute you rely on somebody else to respond in the way you think they're going to respond, you've gone too far, because that is not likely going to happen. And therefore, you're now just ruminating and ruminating and ruminating about things that will never happen. And you've got yourself caught in a place of complete anxiety. And for me, it ends up going into a full-blown panic attack because I allowed myself to ruminate about something that is insignificant in the long term for me. And when you realize that, you do a mindset shift to where, for me, I say, well, she's never going to say that because I'm putting words into her mouth that she would not say. Therefore, this isn't going to happen. I need to stop this.
Completely agree, because talking about depression, I struggle with some people that say they're depressed, because I think the problem is when we come out of depression, everyone expects a perfect life. And I'm like, no life's perfect. Even your billionaire, they don't have a perfect life. They act like they do, but they don't. No life is perfect. So I think I love what you've said there, because in a way we've put ourselves in our own state of depression because of this sort of cycle that's there. So I do love that. So I do apologize. I kept looking at the time, lovely, because I've realized time. Would you mind doing your statement out, please, my lovely?
Sure. So I want everybody to know that you are not broken. You are whole, you are loved, and that you know exactly who you're supposed to be. You know exactly what your purpose is in life. And all you have to do is awaken to it. And when you awaken to it and realize that you are whole and you are worthy, you can walk forward with your head held high, with your inner authority, with your inner wisdom, knowing that you were meant to be here on you were meant to live this life to its fullest, because you, my friend, are exactly who you're supposed to be.
Thank you so much, Terri. Terri's details will be down below, guys, as always, in the description. So do go check her out. There will be for her books and also her life coaching. So do please go and check that out, guys. I hope you're all good. I hope you've enjoyed this. Comment down below. Let us know what you're thinking. Anyway, don't forget, as always, keep sparkling.